Welcome to the One Stiletto in the Grave podcast with your hosts, Sunny Ormonde and Jane James.
Well, hello everyone. We have a fiesta of a show for you today. Get out your castanets because we're talking all things Spanish. Paella, processions and sun. Olé! We focus on ferrets and mousetraps, scream about stress, and muse on culture and language. Oh, and of course, there's a few words from Dorothy. Isn't there, Monica? Here's Jamie. Today's podcast is sponsored by MTL Associates. Would you like a website but don't know where to start? Could your business do with that bit extra? It's less than you think. MTL Associates produces websites for people like you. They'll agree a fixed price for their work, starting from £50 for a 5-page website using one of their templates. And after that, it can be as little as £14 a month. MTL Associates. It's you, but online.
Hi Sunny and hi everybody. Let's kick off with Archer's news because we've had some news from Maddie Leslie, haven't we, in this last week, who plays Chelsea Horrobin and we interviewed a little while back, and she's going into the Mousetrap in the West End.
She is indeed, that's right. She, I believe, opens in June and she plays through to November. So yeah, that's great. I mean, she'll still be around for the Archers if they want to use her because they always work around people. But yeah, it's brilliant news, isn't it? Absolutely fantastic news. Really, really pleased for her. Have you ever seen the Mousetrap, Janie?
I have, but years and years and years ago, and I think when we saw it, there's a gunshot in it, and one of our daughters got terribly upset by the gunshot, and I think we spent quite a lot of the performance trying to console her as she sobbed. So I don't really remember very much about it. Have you seen it?
But like you, years and years and years ago, maybe what we should do, we should go and see her. Should we go and see her? And we can remind ourselves about it and try not to get terrified of the gunshot. But yeah, we should do that, shouldn't we? Yeah, but it's great for her.
It's really, really good because that's 4 months or so in the West End, which and will they be doing? Is that like 7 shows a week or something? I
suppose so. Yeah, there'll be matinees and it'll be quite full on.
How on earth do you survive that, Sunny, when you're doing 7 shows a week?
I don't know. You just do. It's amazing. You know, I think you just psych yourself up for it. It's like anything. You know, people often say, "How on earth do you learn all those lines?" And sometimes I think, actually, I don't know. But you know, you do. When you're faced with the situation, you just do. And of course, adrenaline gets you through a huge amount. It's often the way, certainly when I was younger, because I don't do hugely long seasons anymore, but when I did very long seasons in rep, you'd be absolutely fine, you'd get through it all, and then you'd finish the season, you'd finish a contract, and you'd come down with terrible lurgies.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's just that continued adrenaline boost all the time, and then your body just sort of thinks, oh gosh, I need a rest now. I've pushed myself too far, really. But she's young, she'll be fine, she'll be marvellous.
There is that very common thing, isn't there, that we all find that if you're working hard, go on holiday and then go down with something the first couple of days of the holiday.
Absolutely, yes, it applies to anything, doesn't it? Any kind, if you're working really, really hard. It's just great. It's just great for her.
Rep was mad, wasn't it? Because you'd be doing, I vaguely remember from having worked in a theatre donkey's years back, that you'd be doing 7 shows a week and rehearsing the next show as well.
That's right. And I mean, when I left drama school, we were mostly doing a 3.5-week rehearsal period before we opened. But I do remember doing 2.5-week turnaround because one of my very first jobs was in Sheringham in Norfolk, little theatre, which is still going, which is brilliant. But yeah, it was a 2.5-week turnaround. So you'd be playing in the evening and you'd have 2.5 weeks to get another show on. But there used to be weekly rep, of course, didn't there? You know, it was a week turnaround. True. How they did that, there'd be an awful lot of winging of the lines and words, I suspect. But yeah, amazing. So, I mean, you never got any rest then because obviously you were playing in the evening, rehearsing the next day, learning lines, probably on Sunday. You know, you never got any rest. But yeah.
Very, very stressful.
But there were good times. Oh,
yeah. But speaking of stress, this is a bit of stress hanging around Ambridge at the moment, isn't there? As we record this, there's been a bit of hoo-ha about the cricket, hasn't there?
There has been quite a lot of hoo-ha about the cricket. Yes, it was the Mark Hebden Trophy, wasn't it? That,
It was.
Yes, highlighted. And I think it was Tracy's Tigers and Tom's Tornadoes, although I think Tracy wanted to call them tadpoles.
That's right. He was a
Tom's
tiger.
tadpoles.
He was a tiger originally, but Tracy trademarked the name first or something.
She did.
Yeah.
She did. Yeah, there was a lot of cricket on the green, wasn't there?
An awful lot. Yeah. And then Jim got stressed because he lost his glasses on a stag night. This is
Yes.
very improbable.
Yes. But then didn't somebody say, I was listening the other day, that somebody had put them on a statue somewhere and they were going to investigate that? I don't know. But yes, no, quite improbable. I loved all that, actually.
Me
the
too.
idea of Jim on the stag night was just...
Well, the idea of Jim on a stag night in itself is just highly comical, isn't it?
Absolutely, that he was dragged along. Tracy's hen night was good, wasn't it? And Oliver joined in that.
Yes, he did. But there was a hoo-ha about that. Also a bit of stress because Adele was jolly cross that that the hen night had been held at Grey Gables without his knowledge. And pointed out that Grey Gables is not Oliver's fiefdom anymore. He's a co-owner. I thought very, very right, really.
Yeah, very right.
But yes, Oliver sounded... I think that's probably quite a hard lesson for Oliver to learn. He's used to just doing what he likes there, isn't he?
He is. I like Oliver, though. I love the relationship between Oliver and Tracy. I think
too.
it's well, it's a bit like, isn't it, the Jazzer and Jim one. It's kind of improbables, and they're very fond of each other.
Yeah.
No, it's oh, and of course, was it the Mayfest that was organised by Freddie, and there was Eddie's ferrets, weren't there?
Yes. Yes. I think they felt that was somewhat infra-dig, and they consigned him to some sort of ancient pathway in the middle of nowhere. But Eddie had decided to set up stall in the middle of the main thoroughfare.
Apparently, but then he was packed off to somewhere else next to Ian's pizza van, and Ian was not pleased about that pizza and ferrets. He didn't feel.
I didn't quite see what the ferret thing was about. Was it ferrets down the trousers?
Well, I don't know.
I don't know. I wasn't entirely clear what he was doing with his ferrets.
No, except that Clary had also she'd knitted ferrets, hadn't she, which she was going to sell on the stall.
Right.
There were knitted ferrets, apparently, which,
Okay.
again, I would love to see one of Clary's knitted ferrets. I mean, I didn't know she was a knitter, but clearly she is.
Well, there you go.
Yes. Yes.
I had missed that particular bit of crafting news.
Yes.
I was probably a bit taken with worrying about Helen.
Yes.
Who sounds like a woman on the edge, doesn't she?
She really does sound like a woman on the edge. Yes, it's been a really, really, well, as we speak, as you say, a really incredibly stressful time for her, with the advent of Rob Titchener being around and about. She's really, really stressed, isn't she? And very jumpy in any scenario that she actually gets into. And then they had the food inspector around, didn't they? And
Yes.
apparently there'd been some sort of complaint about the food, and she's convinced that this is something to do with Rob. So yes, a huge amount of stress there. How will this work out? We do not know, do we, listeners, at this moment in time?
No, it may be that when you hear this,
yes,
that we discover that maybe Rob Titchener's just got on a flight back to, is it the US he lives in, or Canada? Just sort of disappeared off and sent a sort of contract message to say, so sorry, and I won't be in touch ever again.
Yeah.
Somehow I doubt that.
Yeah, somehow I doubt that, knowing Rob. But we will wait, won't we, with bated breath. And actually, speaking, we're sort of talking about stress. We thought, didn't we might do a little podcast about stress at some point as well. We thought that was kind of a bit of a useful thing to do, because we all get stressed, don't we?
Well, we certainly do. Every time we get onto this, starts to record a podcast, and one or the other of us drops the microphone on the floor, or can't log in, or whatever.
Yeah, and speaking about all this stress, we were, you found an article, didn't you, the other day, which was women who were full of stress, and they'd found a way through it, didn't they?
I thought this was amazing. It was yeah, it was an article going back to last year, I think, about groups of women who meet to scream in the night. So it started in Australia, wasn't it? Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
And a group of women who meet in a particular place and just scream. And apparently there are groups all over the world doing it now.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, just to get rid of their rage, their anger, their whatever. Yeah, it's amazing. You're right. It did start in Australia. I think it started in Sydney, didn't it? And she was a lady. I think she's about 54 years old or something, and she just decided she sort of just needed to get out into the open air and scream. And I think then she sort of put it online or something, didn't she? Like
I think
that?
she put a message on a local Facebook group, and then lots of people joined her. I don't know. What do you think? Is it something you'd like to do?
Scream. Well, I think it's interesting. My first thought about that, actually, when I read that, because I think it's a brilliant idea, was, my vocal cords. You've got to be careful how you scream, because you might, if I got to do some radio the next day, I might lose my voice.
Yeah.
But no. But yeah. Well, how about you? What do you think?
I think it's really. I feel like I'd like to do it. I don't know if I'd have the bottle to do it, but I did actually look up to find if there was any local group into screaming. But
yes.
when I googled women screaming in groups, I found links to some really dodgy stuff.
Did you?
Yeah. So I couldn't find anything of a feminist nature. Let's put it like that. But I do quite like the idea of just being able to have a good old holler, because sometimes life just does get to you, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I mean, I know in the past, because I do get cross, and I do, sometimes you just get up and above your head, don't you? It's just like too much. I've thrown things about, thrown cushions and things about. I find that quite a good way to kind of get rid of that energy. Yeah. It's that angry energy. Yeah, it's interesting, about the screaming, because when I've been working as an actor, and occasionally there's been a play or something we've been working on where you have to scream. It doesn't happen very often, but it's amazing how many actors find it difficult to scream, to find that voice. I've never had that problem, you understand, but you'd be surprised to know. But yes, some people do find it, even though they're actors, find it quite difficult to sort of find that point where they just, I'm not going to do it, obviously I'm not, but just let it all go. But I'm sure it's probably is quite good for us. And I know in that article as well that you sent me, there were women in India who found groups, who founded groups to do that. And they specifically in India, because they're so repressed and there's such a lot of violence against them, they say it's just the most wonderful thing. But I think they have to be quite careful where they do it and how they do it in case they're seen.
Yeah, I thought it was just a very interesting idea. I mean, like you, I've kicked cushions, ripped up newspapers. That's another good one. And I know I've heard, and I found myself that if I'm in a situation where I feel like I need to scream because I'm in danger, it's really hard to scream. I tend to lose that capability at all. And I remember someone suggested to me, and I did, teach my daughters as teenagers to scream fire if they were attacked, because people would come out if they heard, people would come and help if they thought there was a fire, but they wouldn't if they just heard a woman screaming. They'd think it was hijinks or whatever.
That's a really good idea, Janie, actually.
So maybe I'll just, well, that wouldn't be good though, would it, to meet up with a load of people and all shout fire? But anyway.
But that is an interesting thing, actually, because I think that's what my first thought with the screaming, when I said, I didn't want to hurt my voice, that actually, because screaming is, if where you place it's quite guttural, it sits right back in your throat, whereas actually if you use a word with the same amount of energy and open it up, it's a bit like meditation, isn't it? People use the word because actually that's a nice round sound. So, but maybe it's finding the right sort of sound. But I'd be interested to see if anybody has lost their voice doing it.
And if anybody's started a screaming group in the UK,
absolutely,
let us know.
Do let us know, because that would be very, very, very useful, actually. I'm trying to think where, yes, you just could do it anywhere, couldn't you? Parks, fields, anywhere where it's hopefully away from a from a lot of people or community.
We should
come running.
Yeah, we should get Helen to start one in Ambridge.
Well, that's the point. That's the point. Kate might be very much for that, mightn't she? That's true, actually. It's a good way, isn't it, of getting rid of stress. And speaking as we are about these stressful things, I think Dorothy has a tale to tell, doesn't she?
Oh, Sunny, she does. And here's Dorothy talking about what was a bit of a do for her and a very stressful incident for the doctor's receptionist.
So, listeners, I was telling you last time about my friend Monica. Ooh, she's had some health problems, and I fell out very badly with the doctor over the last one. The way they dealt with the whole episode was shocking, and if the receptionist's been on Valium ever since, it's no more than she deserves. I asked her very nicely to send the doctor round to Monica, and she interrupted me extremely rudely. "Can't she come in?" she says. "Come in," I said. "She's got a temperature of 103. She's been as sick as a dog, and she thinks there are small green bugs in her hair." "Does that cut any ice? Does it? Hell." "Well, can't you put her in a taxi?" she says. "The doctor's very busy, you know." "Fine," I said. "Just give me the number of a taxi firm that's prepared to hose down the upholstery after they've dropped her off, and we'll be round like a shot." Shouldn't like that at all. "There's no need to be sarcastic," she says. Sarcastic? I hadn't even started. Do you know, it took me over 10 minutes, but finally I got through to the doctor, and he told me to call for an ambulance because it would take him a while to get to us, what with a full surgery and the receptionist sniffing harpic in the cleaner's cupboard and refusing to come out. Emergency service. 2.5 minutes of my heart will go on, a poor choice in the circumstances, and an answer machine with a Geordie accent telling me that my call's important. And all the time, Monica's heaving and groaning in my smallest room and trying to swat non-existent bugs with my Teflon-coated omelette pan. Well, luckily, she was still alive when they finally got round to picking up the phone, but I had to go through all her symptoms again before they agreed to send an ambulance, and that's only after they asked me if she might have overdosed on illegal substances. Anyway, as soon as she was on the mend, I helped her to find a flat at Beechcroft and moved her in. I visited as often as I could, and I always said they could do with someone strong with a bit of backbone to keep the place in order. And then, when a flat came empty, the silly goose forgot to tell me. Didn't you? For 7 whole months! If I hadn't hand-delivered her birthday card and run into the warden, I'd have missed out. Anyway, now we're living in the same building, and she is my faithful lieutenant in all my endeavours. We make a marvellous team. Well, I organise the coffee mornings, she does the washing up. I spot the dog mess on the path, she picks it up. I'm not a sentimental woman, but you've been a good friend to me, haven't you, Monica? Monica? Don't touch that switch, Monica!
Oh, poor Monica. She did do her very best to keep Dorothy at bay, didn't she? I think if there'd be a queue of women to sign up for screaming therapy at Beechcroft, don't you think?
I think they really would, wouldn't they? Oh, very funny, actually. Yeah, they really would. They'd be howling at the moon, wouldn't they, like a pack of demented werewolves? Now, look, you've taken advantage, haven't you, of being signed off by the doctors to take a trip to Spain, haven't you?
I did, yes. I went to visit a very old and dear friend for just a bit less than a week and had a lovely time in the sunshine.
Oh, it was sunny. Oh, good.
I arrived in pouring rain, but
oh, did you?
Where I went to in Almeria in the south has a sort of microclimate of its own. So although we were watching Spanish news, there were floods everywhere. It was beautiful.
Oh, how wonderful. Yeah. How wonderful. And was the flight all right? I mean, I know we discussed, because you went to Portugal, didn't you, before, and it was a bit sort of chaotic at the airport, but how was it then?
Well, actually,
Not good.
it wasn't East problem, but just one of those things. Allowed ages to get to the airport, and then we were stuck for an hour and a quarter on the M23. There was an awful accident, and everything was we were just stopped for an hour and a quarter. Air ambulance, all the rest of it. There's a motorbike hit. I hope that person is okay. So yeah, it took. But once I got there, I was so relieved to be there that flying, everything else seemed very, very simple about it.
So you got there in time then, obviously, for the flight.
Just about hurled myself onto the flight. So that was all good.
Good.
And I had a really interesting time.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. So, I mean, when you're there, are there any specific things that you kind of like to do or with your chum, or?
There's so much in that area in the south of Spain, so many archaeological areas and places of special interest that are just very accessible. So we went to see a load of things. We watched, do you know about the religious processions in Spain? They have them.
I've kind of seen them, but I don't really know much about them.
Yeah, so they have them usually in Holy Week. And it's the ones in Andalusia are particularly kind of glamorous and lovely, but they also have them in some areas for Whitsun, and it was Whitsun while I was there. Okay. So we watched just these extraordinary processions, and people join these groups. They're called brotherhoods, but I think women can belong to them. And so at these particular times, they have these sort of floats with sort of artwork, sculptures of either Christ or the Blessed Virgin Mary in particular poses, and people sort of carry them as if they were litters, on those poles, parade them through the streets. And in this particular one for Whitsun, there are oxen that follow, and the oxen kneel down in front of the float. And people are dressed and very, it's very, people are very passionate about it, as indeed they are in Holy Week. I mean, that's incredible. People wear these penitential robes with a sort of big pointy hats, and often they're barefoot, so it's like a pilgrimage. They're walking across streets for hours and hours and hours barefoot. It's quite a thing, and people are very, very passionate about it. And I can imagine that in the Middle Ages it would have been an incredible spectacle with all these candles suddenly appearing in your town or village before the age of television. And I can't imagine it happening here.
In Britain?
No, it's not what we do, is it?
No. And I suppose, is it to do with the fact that, old Henry VIII and, the Catholicism took a back seat, and, the Protestant, because it's a different kind of energy, isn't it? But the Catholic feel is much more, it's more dramatic in a way. Isn't it? It's got that kind of a really passionate feel to it. Whereas, no, you're right. Over here, it's certainly, but I suspect it's probably to do with the whole Protestant thing.
I think you're right. I think there's very little that gets people on the streets excited, apart from perhaps football.
Yes, absolutely. And so, in Spain, do villages? I mean, how long are these processions? Is it that villages join in with each other? I mean, how does it work? Where does it?
They're often in the sort of. I mean, I'm no expert on this, Sunny. I'm a complete idiot, but it's in the biggest cities. So in Almeria, which is the nearest place to where my friend Enrique lives, I think there are 26 brotherhoods, and in Cordoba there's 37. There are different numbers of them in different places, and they're the people who organise particular processions for their particular icons, I suppose.
Wow. And is it? You say it's brotherhoods, but is it women and children as well?
I have seen women. I think that's probably a more recent thing, but yes, I have seen women and younger children involved too. I mean, lining. I've been there for Easter week, for Holy Week, and I sort of lined the streets because this is like in the middle of the night,
right.
So yeah, kind of 11 o'clock or midnight, you're out there lining the streets, sort of watching all this happening in the dark with the candles and the singing. There's there's a lot of singing, marching bands, singing, playing and singing devotional music. It's quite a thing.
It's quite stirring, I guess. Yeah. Emotive, emotional.
Yeah. I feel very boring when I'm in Europe. I don't know about you, particularly in the sort of Mediterranean countries.
Yes. Well, yeah, they are more passionate people, aren't they? They're more engaged with their emotions on the surface, aren't they? We're a bit more reserved, aren't we, generally, I think, here. And they're more engaged on a spiritual level, I think, in some ways. I mean, I don't. Of course, people are engaged spiritually, but they're more overt with it, aren't they? I think. And
the voice comes from which will interest you as an actor. When they lived on the farm, my friend speaks 3 languages fluently: French, Spanish, and English. And if he was on the top of a hill at the farm, and I could barely see him, let alone hear him, I would know if he was speaking English or Spanish, because his body language is the way he holds his body is differently, and the place the voice comes from is differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. Absolutely, completely. If you think about, I don't know, I know we're talking about Spanish, but Italy particularly, I think there's an awful lot of hand movement that tends to go, isn't it, with the conversation. It's an interesting cultural thing, isn't it, that, and how all that developed. And how different accents do. I mean, I love the French accent because it's all you place it somewhere differently, and again, it's slightly more volatile, isn't it? And I suppose they're warmer climates there. Britain we start to get a bit colder, don't we? And then we get up to, Sweden, and it in a way the weather almost dictates it. It makes you slightly tighter. I think you're right. As well.
I think you're right. Yeah, we're not out there on the streets, sort of speaking to each other, are we? We're sat at home on the sofa, covered in duvets, drinking Bovril. Speaking of which, and Spain and Bovril, last time we spoke, you were going to go and make some Spanish hot chocolate. Did you do it?
I did. It was delicious.
Well, next time I come and visit you, I expect to get...
Oh, my goodness gracious. I shall have to make the old Spanish...
Get the old hot
Spanish
chocolate.
Hot chocolate.
Get the old hot chocolate out, and I shall look forward to that. Yeah, so what is for dinner at your house tonight, then? Is it spag bol?
It isn't spag bol, but before we get into that, one of the things I did want to ask you, and you may not know any of this, of course, but what's the situation with bullfighting now in Spain?
I don't know. Again, I've never been to a bullfight, but I know that obviously it stopped during COVID. And there were, I think back in about 2007, there was something like 900 bull rings. And I think that it's down to more like 300 now.
Right.
So it's something that people aren't going to so much. I think maybe the younger generation aren't so interested. It's expensive. There's still a lot of Spaniards who are interested in it, and
it just seems extraordinary to me because it's just, so awful. It seems to me it's so violent and awful, and that's why I was kind of interested to see where people sat with it, really. I think it's like a lot of these things, isn't it? Tradition. People just accept things because it's tradition, and it's then when you start to query it. And maybe a lot of the younger people are sort of more objective about it. I don't know, but it just seems to be such a cruel thing. And,
I don't know. Well, on the Spanish news, one of the presenters, young woman, is married to or engaged to a bullfighter, and he was being interviewed, but not about bullfighting. So there was no comment about the fact that he was a bullfighter, either pro or anti. I can see it's hugely theatrical with the costumes and the different grades of bullfighters and the way it all works. But the central part about it, I think, to our eyes, is very cruel. And we tend to have, I think pretty much all that kind of stuff has been put a stop to here, hasn't it? You stopped bear baiting a long time ago.
Absolutely.
And cockfighting and
Yeah.
in theory fox hunting
Yeah.
now is meant to be illegal. And just killing animals for fun.
Yeah,
I
for
don't
fun.
know why that's different to killing animals to eat. I'm sure a lot of people would agree that that's very cruel too. But the whole.
But at least that's sort of, whether you agree with it or not, at least it's for some particular purpose. Whereas with the, the bullfighting or the bear baiting or whatever it was. I mean, in Roman times, all the gladiators and it was horrendous. I find it fascinating. It was entertainment. I find it fascinating with the bullfighting that it's sort of still a hangover from all that, and it's obviously still part of the culture. Interesting. Do you speak Spanish, Janie?
Very badly. I mean, I've been learning it for years, but it kind of reminds me. My dad said when he was sent to France in 1940 or 1939 that the greatest shock to him, he thought he was pretty good at French. As a sort of 21-year-old, he'd learnt French at school. And he said it was such a shock to land in France and realise that 3-year-old children could speak French better than he could. He never got over the shock. And at one point, I could speak Spanish at about the level of a 5-year-old, which I thought was pretty good. I can read it reasonably well, and I can make myself understood, but I can't. I'm never there long enough to get my ear in and to be able to understand when people speak at normal rate. So, there's no point at all in my friend speaking Spanish to me because it just frustrates us both. It means that we just are exchanging information and ideas incredibly slowly.
It's that pace thing.
Yeah,
it's that pace thing, isn't
blah, 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 blah.
it? Yeah. Because you and you can't. Oh, hang on a minute. What did you say? Yeah.
And really, I think the only way to take that, I don't know about you, but I think the only way to take that next step is to start listening to radio or TV in another language and just trying to get.
It's kind of conversational, isn't it? You almost have to be there.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of learning, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
So do you still have a go though if you're out? Do you sort of
Yeah, I have a go. Yeah. Do you have any fluency in any other languages?
Hopeless, absolutely hopeless. I've never been, and interesting, isn't it? Because I think I've quite a good ear for accents. This is what's fascinating about the brain, isn't it? I've got quite a good ear for accents, but language, I've never been good. Our dear friend Sarah Coward, who played Caroline Sterling in The Archers, brilliant. She was fluent in French, and it was always there. Even if she hadn't spoken it for a while, she would be able to have a conversation with somebody, in France, because she lived out there for a bit. And I mean, I heard her, and very fast too. No, she had, but no, I'm sad about that because I would love to be able to. I mean, I did learn a bit of Russian once when I was at school, but I mean, it's a different part of the brain. And it's interesting with Sarah in a way, because I know she wouldn't mind me saying this, I'm sure. She often had issues, remember, with accents. She'd sometimes come to me if she was doing something. It's so interesting, isn't it? Part of her brain, fabulous for the actual languages, but not the. We're extraordinary creatures, us human beings, aren't we? Extraordinary. So, yes. So, did you come back with any lovely food recipes from Spain, or maybe you've got favourite? Oh, did you?
Yeah. So he was a chef. That was his job, and he worked at the Savoy. He worked at the Coq d'Or. He worked at, he ran these places. He was a wonderful chef. So it's a great joy to watch him cook and to write down some of the things that he does. Yeah.
Is it mostly Spanish there? Is he kind of multi?
He grew up in France, and so it's a lot of Spanish, a lot of French, and everything very, very just simple, very good, simple food done in a way that I couldn't aspire to.
Oh, I bet you could.
Well, it's a nightmare feeding him when he comes here. I'm terrified. Which takes me back really to the question I asked far too prematurely, which is Are you having spag bol tonight?
No, I'm not, darling. I'm not. I'm not having
I'm
spag bol
disappointed.
tonight. No, I'm not. But, talking about all this lovely Spanish food, I'm thinking about, not that I'm going to have it tonight, but it's made me think, I rather fancy a paella.
Oh, there you go.
So maybe not tonight, but I might at some point have a
go.
And tapas, of course, that's
Love
Spanish,
tapas.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really good. So no, I'm not sure tonight because it's very, very sunny here today, and I think it probably is with you. So
Yeah.
it might just be something a bit light, a nice little light salad or something like that, Janie. I might just go for, Yeah.
Yep.
What about you, love?
I don't know whether we've got a house full of eggs. I've no idea where they've all come from, but I think I might have over-ordered. I think it's one of those things. Do you get that thing sometimes you think, I haven't got any eggs, I'll buy them.
Yes.
But you do that every time you go out. So,
Yes.
yeah. So I think I'm going to be making an omelette the size of my head.
Spanish omelette, possibly.
Necessarily, yes.
All right, love. Well, look, you go off. Enjoy your eggs,
Thank you.
your herbs.
And you enjoy your salad.
I will. All
right.
Bye. Ole, 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 ole.
Thanks for listening to our One Stiletto in the Grave podcast. If you'd like to see behind-the-scenes clips and bonus content, please visit our Facebook page, One Stiletto in the Grave podcast. And if you'd like to ask any questions, follow us on Twitter at OneStiletto65. This podcast is produced by Raggedy House Productions and the music composed by Tom Smith. See you next time!